Hello and welcome to season 2 of Stacy's Infinity podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Stacy Cisneros, and this is the podcast where we make the energetic practical. My guest today, I'm so excited to introduce her to you. She's actually bridging clinical psychology with trauma-informed and ethical spiritual practice. Today I have with me Dr. Kerri Husman, who is an integrative psychiatrist serving Iowa and Colorado, specializing in energy psychology, hypnosis, functional approaches, and psychedelic assisted work to support individuals navigating trauma, spiritual crises, neuroplastic pain, and treatment resistant conditions. She is also a trauma-informed coach and healing touch practitioner, offering holistic, personalized care that honors each client's unique needs and capacity for healing. In addition, Dr. Husman serves as a shamanic practitioner and a guest faculty member with the Foundation for Shamanic Studies, where she guides students in expanding their spiritual practices with integrity and ethical grounding. Through her diverse training and commitment to ongoing learning, Dr. Husman offers multiple pathways for meaningful healing and transformation. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Kerri.
Well, thank you so much, Stacy. I greatly appreciate it. I'm glad to be here, and that was a fantastic introduction. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. I just wanted to connect with other physicians like yourself who have a myriad of techniques, modalities, and tools to help others restore their inner sense of well being, their peace, and even heal.
hmm
And so today I'd like to touch on what all of that means to you and about your healing journey. Many of us have been trained through the system through
hmm
very rigorous practices and in our training. And I wanted to hear a little bit about your story and what led you to all these different modalities and how you're using them today.
Well, thank you for that question. One of the things that I really was drawn to this for was an urgency. I had two family members dying of cancer. So that pushed me into a space where I needed to quickly learn healing touch and core shamanism techniques for healing to support them. I was already working in functional medicine training and utilizing functional medicine to support these two family members. And I'd gotten into that because of some of my own health issues, gut and GI issues, and later diagnosis of Sjogren's. And that I was using to help myself and then those individuals. But I also knew that there was going to be a point where functional medicine would only do so much, right? You know, when you have a diagnosis of a terminal condition, yes, that might prolong quality of life, length of life, reduction in need for outside resources to support one's ability to do ADLs and be at home. And, functional medicine checked all those boxes. It was really helpful. But I saw the writing on the wall, maybe because I'm a manifestor generator, but I could see into that, I was going to need to learn a lot more very quickly. And so dove into that, after an interesting experience. I had had a reactivation of mono. I could barely breathe for 3 weeks and was really struggling to function, to get to work, to do everything I needed to do. And talked to a friend of mine who was on the functional medicine path in anesthesia and was healing touch trained. And she said, "Oh, you need to call Laura." And so Laura Hart, who's now deceased, who's a PhD nurse researcher at the university and has published extensively in healing touch techniques in the hospital setting for cancer and post-surgical care. I call Laura, and Laura says, "I've been waiting for your call." Now, I'm 100% sure that my friend had not reached out to her, and she just knew. And so she had me place my fingers as she's talking to me on marma points and ask me to tell her when I sensed the shift. Now, I've never done anything like this. I had never sent, I didn't know what I was doing. She said, "Oh, good, good. And now put your fingers here and let me know when okay, okay." And after probably 6 of those, she asks me, "Kerri, how's your breathing now?" And I was breathing fine. And my first thought was, "Wow, that's a great placebo. Holy cow." I've been wooed into thinking that my breathing problems are just gone magically. And this is what I'm thinking inside my head. The other part of my brain is thinking, wow, I got to learn this, right? And so she said, well, let's have you come in tomorrow and we'll just check you out. Make sure you're doing okay. And I figured by morning, oh, the breathing problem will be back. I'll go to sleep, comfortable, wake up miserable. I woke up feeling fine. But I went in anyway because, again, I'm not going to say no to this. And they did a healing, her and Maggie. Maggie's also deceased, also a researcher in Healing Touch. The two of them did a session on me and talked to me and taught me continually as they were doing the steps of what they were doing. Now, this is not formal instruction, right? This was just them. They knew that they needed to teach me as much as they possibly could. And I knew that walking in the door. I need to learn as much as I can from the two of these women before they pass. And within a year, they were both dead. So it was a
Wow.
very rapid progression of learning from them. And they were very opinionated about certain things, like even working in shamanism. They had met people who described themselves as shaman, who worked with middle world spirits, who they could sense some darkness about some of the things they were doing and were concerned about me learning shamanism. Even though I had shared with them, I've been thinking about learning core shamanism for years, which looks like it's ethically based. Their president is a lawyer. I mean, it looks like it's really legitimate. They were worried for me. They were worried that I would be getting into something maybe not as ethical as I hoped. And as I started that training, I was sharing with them what I was learning, how I was learning it, and they approved. But it took hearing how that educational process went for them to feel trustworthy of that. I had phenomenally good fortune to have such incredible mentors who were so extensively trained for many decades in many modalities working with energy and with spirit and with consciousness and applying that in various ways to their nursing practice.
Wow. That is phenomenal. I had something similar happen with the modalities that I use.
Hmm.
So I use infinity healing, which is a subconscious belief shifting modality. At the time, maybe about 10 years back, I was listening to this meditation on replay, and all of a sudden I felt electricity go through my body. And I was like, wait, what just happened? That was real. And something that shifted in my beliefs. And the audio was about being a little bit more comfortable with my money situation.
Hmm.
And so I didn't understand exactly how a shift in my belief could trigger a physical symptom or a physical sensation. But I saw in the days following that I felt more comfortable balancing my checkbook. And so something in me was also leading me to further investigate. And I said, I have to know what's on that other end. Like the clinical part of me was very curious, and I wanted to know, well, how are we interfacing with the world around us? What's our framework? Like what's really going on, right? And from my perspective, I see science as conflating the mind with consciousness, and other older traditions say the consciousness or the energy comes first, and that's what puts together the body, it brings
Hmm.
together the mind. And so I'm really curious to know what your framework is regarding how we interface with the world around us and how that's being used in the different modalities.
There are different interfaces, right? There's one that's your spiritual interface is going to be different from your energetic interface. And so, talking about the energetic interface, so if you consider the 7 layers of your energetic field, your etheric out to your etheric template, and each of these layers of your field is connected to a chakra, an expression of that chakra, and has a different density and texture to it as you're working on those different layers of the field when you're doing healing touch, for example. And what will happen is, let's say you've been exposed to the flu, right? Common thing to happen in the winter in the Midwest and the whole country right now. And so the flu may be in your energy field. It hasn't yet fully attacked your physical body. You don't have symptoms. You aren't replicating virus yet, but it has made its way into your field. Now, obviously, as a medical doctor, you're like, well, either you have the flu or you don't, right? You might be exposed, but it didn't have enough oomph to really get you sick, right? Or you had enough immunity that you knocked it down quickly. It's either yes or no. It's black and white in medicine. You either have the flu or you don't. And yes, there could be, like when you're doing a COVID test, for example, you may not have enough viral copies yet to pass the threshold. But from an energetic standpoint, you've been exposed, it may be in your field, and it can be addressed before illness strikes, before you become sick. And so knowing that, going into a space, for example, so I have a genetic immune deficiency, patients wear masks, clients wear masks in my office, and so do I. So that's how we interface, because if I get sick, my treatment resistant patients with ketamine and Spravato who need to be seen weekly would not be able to be seen. I'm homesick, right? So we just take that extra step of precaution to make sure people aren't getting sick. So that's a physical interface that is done to help protect my patients, right? So you can do a lot of things energetically to protect yourself in the situation of going into a space of deep rage or anguish, or returning to a family gathering where there's been challenging history and emotional baggage. And so all of those things also can be hitting your energy field. How are you responding? You're responsible for your energy field. You can learn techniques and tools to help mitigate and manage that and strengthen that boundary and decide what you're going to be carrying within that and what you're not going to be allowing in. So there's so much you can do with your energetic interface that people feel rather powerless to do, but they can. And that's different from beliefs, right? But it's part of it, because if you don't believe you have any power to do that, you're not going to do it.
Right.
So people can be taught how to work with that energy field. When I do healing touch for animals techniques, which are vastly different from healing touch for humans, I know that sounds strange, but the energy body of an animal is pixelated and ours is layered. And so you have to work with that energy body differently. However, because we are technically animals, those techniques work very well still on humans, but not the reverse. And so the trauma release techniques that require no language, no description, the client does not have to describe any of their traumatic experience to you at all, can still be released energetically from that field and result in pretty substantial reduction in turmoil, distress, and eventually positive change. And sometimes rapid positive change. Like the next day, they have a lightness about them that, oh my gosh, that event doesn't have isn't sitting in the driver's seat anymore, right?
Wow. I'm curious to know, and also for the listeners, regarding which modalities address which layers of energy field. Does it address all the layers, or do you also use a mix of healing touch or other belief work or hypnosis or any other modalities to address these different parts that we might be having issues with?
That's a fantastic question, Stacy. So when so I can think of several different scenarios to share. So let me start with comprehensive energy psychology. So this is a set of techniques. It's really a toolbox that allows you to insert your other tools and use them when they're called upon, based on, it does use energy checking or muscle testing, and it uses it in a very unique way. So instead of the practitioner testing on behalf of the client, the practitioner is teaching the client to also muscle test. And so we're making sure that we're getting the same answers, that we're both tuned up energetically. And we're doing a variety of steps to clear systemic energetic interferences to make sure that the answers we're getting are reliable before we start really getting to the meat and potatoes, to the really deep material that is keeping a goal out of reach, target beliefs that your conscious mind knows need to be cleared, but then ultimately all the unconscious beliefs under the surface. So you've got to make sure that your energy testing or checking is correct to get to that. Now, as you're clearing these, whether it's installing a goal, clearing a target belief, or clearing those blocks, those psychoenergetic reversals, that's where all the different aspects of the energy systems come into play. So the more energy systems you are able to work with and clear, install, and understand, the better, right? So while the biofield, the layers of the biofield, that's one system. While the meridians is our separate system, the chakra is another system. Now, do these interact with one another? Absolutely. And there are several other systems, as you know, but using those as examples because the chakras do communicate with the layers of the field. The chakras are the distribution system, while the dantians are the batteries. And working with each of these systems, it's just so interesting when someone is clearing a belief out of their lower dantian. The first time I experienced it, I smelled diesel fuel fumes coming out of me, and it was explained to me that it was being done by other people, and I'm like, "Do you guys smell gas?" And they're saying, yeah, this is really common. The lower dantian tends to pick up a lot of environmental toxins and pollutants, like just from you driving on the highway, for example, it just picks that up. Again, I thought this was, am I just making this up? How is this possible? But since then, in the many years I've been practicing these techniques, this happens to other people too. I'll be working on it. If that is what's called for, either they're clearing it out of themselves or it's a healing touch session for a client where I'm administering, that would be a separate situation, then we'll start smelling this, diesel fuel or chainsaw gas, whatever it might be coming out. And that's just amazing to think that that residual is so powerful, even though it's not necessarily measurable, though maybe it could be with some very fancy heavy metal type testing where you're looking at hydrocarbons and things like that. But I don't know. It's just fascinating how these things become strong enough to be able to sense them, and others can sense them too. And then you're thinking, okay, these aren't shared delusions. I mean, you're doing this and something happens that you didn't expect, and you just have to accept that as this is a part of the healing process or clearing process. It passes. And again, it's no longer held in that energy field, which is great.
That is fascinating. My mind is running, trying to understand the mechanics, obviously, behind all of this. And I wonder about what you mentioned about shared experiences, how the idea of non-duality, like how we tap back into connecting with the person next to us, the practitioner, the person down the street. How do we do that and access all that information in order to release all those beliefs and really return to wholeness? It sounds like that's a lot of what your work is with shamanism, bringing in that healing element, transmuting it for yourself and for your clients.
With core shamanism, we're working primarily with power. And when we're working with the spirit, so spirit and soul are much the same. People think of your soul as being a part of you and a spirit possibly being one that doesn't have a body any longer. But again, they're interchangeable terms. They're that spiritual essence of you that I think many people would agree, but not everyone, has a much longer lifespan than this physical body, possibly eternal. And again, it's hard for us in our bodies and the minds that we have to fully accept that, and other people have no trouble at all accepting that. So it's not my place to convince someone else that A, spirits are real, B, that you have a spirit or soul, C, that it may have a life longer than your physical body. That's up to a student or client to figure out on their own. I can't do that for them. But oftentimes, when people have these experiences with their ancestors directly, or with the return of soul portions and the return of power and a connection with a power animal, extracting things that are no longer serving them, thought forms, intrusions, really getting clarity and feeling alive again in their body, that oftentimes will bring someone to believe, hey, maybe there's something to this. And that pain or whatever it may have been with extraction work, there's often a physical component, that bum hip that's been bothering me, or the knee, or whatever it might be. Though realistically, doing extraction work, oftentimes intrusions are in motion, they aren't necessarily static, but something will clear or heal. I had a gal that she had come in for really heart work. I mean, she was going through some pretty substantial grief and worked within the grief counseling field. And we had, when we're doing a shamanic healing session, the helping spirits are coming, they're doing the work through my hands, through me, and we're clearing what needs to be cleared, restoring power, sending her on her way. And the next time she comes in, she says, you know, my leg pain is gone. Now, I think I might have mentioned it once that I did have this leg issue. And I know that you worked around that there were some things you did around that leg, but it's gone, completely gone. No doctor could figure out what it was. It's just gone now. And it's still gone, the last I've talked to her. um,
Wow.
which these things happen where that wasn't even the focus, but the helping spirits bring back what this person needs right now and what this person's able to accept. The more open you are to receive and let go, the more work they can do. And that's the kind of healing. I mean, but I can tell so many stories of tumors disappearing by the time you have the biopsy. So the person's had the ultrasound. Yep, you need the biopsy. Do the sessions. They go in. There's nothing there. Or having people who've blown through all the cancer treatments. You're now considered incurable. We have nothing to offer you. And doing healing sessions for that, and the person's tumors shrink. We have one
Wow.
example of a gal we worked with at the beginning of 2019, and in that situation, and my husband and I worked on her together. So I did shamanic healing, he did healing touch. So my husband is a healing touch practitioner, and this was because we were working on family members of his, and he was willing to learn at the same time. And he has amazing skills. He's one of those very humble people, and he can ground anybody, which is including me. I run a charge, and he can just ground me. It's great. um, and so us working together on either side of the table, he's doing his work, I'm doing mine, and some things clear faster with some of the shamanic techniques being administered at the same time. He would say, wow, that cleared XYZ. So at any rate, she messages us once a year to let us know that she's still doing fine, even though she'd been told there was nothing more for her many years ago now. And that's just
Really
beautiful.
amazing.
Yeah.
Really, it is. Wow. And it's interesting that you say that when I do infinity healing with groups of people,
Hmm.
even live, we might be working on money issues. When I ask after, the session, what did people feel, if anything? I've heard people feel, oh, I had this thing on my hand. I felt energy moving, my shoulders feeling better, pain went away. Other people, like, it manifests so differently.
Yep.
Um, and that's just the belief work, just dipping into the subconscious. So
Hmm.
for most people, this is a realm that they can't really feel or sense to the degree that we feel and sense with our senses, right?
Right.
And I think that's why it's called into question a lot of times, and it's hard to standardize just because it's very hard to quantify many times. But it seems like we're also discovering new ways of seeing how effective these different modalities are. So I wanted to touch a little bit about you being the president of ASAP, which is the Association for Comprehensive Energy Psychology, your work there, and also about how you're helping practitioners to parse out coaching versus therapy. Can you speak to that?
I'm happy to. So, the work of ASEP is pretty phenomenal. It's a international organization, and the intention behind the organization is to be a home for energy psychology methods, be a home for education regarding a wide variety of energy and energy psychology methods and healing. And we have many sister organizations, some of which are in the transpersonal space, others that are in fully energy healing space. And so there's a beautiful synergy when we have our annual conference of learning opportunities that are some experiential, like straight up, you could just do a track that is every hour on the hour during the learning labs of experientials of brand new techniques maybe you've never experienced before. So just being able to, in a group setting, kind of like what you're describing, like a large group has a healing type experience and learns what it feels like to have that administered to them, which oftentimes helps people decide whether or not they want to learn that modality. It's great. And we have larger, up to 6 hour long trainings that are oftentimes a mini training of a full credentialing to get a taste of how to do something where you could actually take it into your office on Monday. So the organization does do education, including EFT 1 and 2, and a certification in emotional freedom techniques, which is tapping with using the meridians. The comprehensive energy psychology training program is currently on hold. It's been teaching muscle testing and energy checking with all the elaborate and reversal trainings that are done. It's just been a challenge to figure out how to implement that virtually. There'd been an intention to do that entirely virtually, and it's been stalled out a little bit. But the hope is we'll get that going and figure out a way or possibly have part of it in person. Over time, what we've done is brought in several experts in their field. So TFT or TAT or Ask and Receive or AIT, there's all these acronyms for all these different beautiful, unique modalities. They may have some overlap with each other, but they're working with conscious, they're working with the energy field, and they're working to exact rapid lasting change. That's shared amongst all the energy psychology methods. And there's an enormous database now. There are over 200 studies. There are many meta-analyses showing substantial lasting benefit for a variety of psychiatric diagnoses, and getting that information into the hands of practitioners and into the hands of licensing boards to help them understand that energy psychology has a place at the table and is a legitimate practice. So there are lots of things that are done to help support that within the organization, mostly done by volunteers.
That's so amazing. I love that work that's coming out because this is where we start with the beliefs. And then there have been, like you said, so many different modalities and so many different experiences that do show clear benefit when
Mhm.
these modalities are implemented. So this is an exciting time, I think, for
Absolutely.
this branch of, yeah,
And
for healing in general, I think.
our research committee will help to some extent with helping people get the ducks in a row if they're wanting to publish a case report or case series, to really help get that into the literature out there so others can see that this modality actually works. So that's another thing that is just incredibly important to the organization as a whole, getting this on paper and out there.
That's wonderful. I wanted to kind of explain for the listeners, because there might not be a lot of clarity surrounding these issues. We're both licensed medical doctors who are actively practicing, and we are also both coaches, right? So
Correct?
I like to explain to my audience that there's a difference between therapeutics and helping people get to a baseline of normalcy, And then there's the aspect of coaching, which already assumes that you're at this baseline of normalcy and you want to kind of go to that next level. And it's part of personal development, really,
Absolutely.
personal actualization. So there's these two steps here. And I wanted to really unpack this a little bit and see your perspective on this and the importance of being mindful of those two different strategies, right?
Absolutely. And I really thank you for bringing that question to play because it brings some controversy. So realistically, when one is engaged in coaching with a coach. And again, there are so many different types of coaches. There are coaches for money, there are coaches for manifesting, there are coaches that are working on aspects of trauma, which again gets really sticky because how is that not psychotherapy? Well, to be a trauma informed coach means that you understand very clearly where you fit in that lane. If someone's goal is in a coaching world, so their goal is to work on speaking my truth, and they have had, let's say, extensive trauma therapy, EMDR, other techniques to work on the abuse and narcissistic issues that they had from their upbringing. Let's say they had a traumatic upbringing and they were never allowed to speak up, and everything they said was shot down, and they've carried that burden through their life. And they've gotten to a place of relative healing and wellness, but they now really want to shine, like you've said, really want to be able to speak their truth. And so, what you're doing is going in and finding out what has still stayed alive within them, right? The unworthiness, the self doubt, the fear of success, right? What if someone actually listens to me? Holy cow, what'll happen? So you're clearing all those unconscious beliefs that aren't necessarily addressed in EMDR because that's focused directly on the trauma that happened. So you really are taking them to the next level beyond what had been done in that trauma therapy. So that's a way to look at it that I think helps most people understand that this may not have been what was ever addressed therapeutically, and this is what's going to help that person really thrive and not have that defining them anymore that happened in the past.
Sounds
So,
good.
yeah, and so when people think about using energy and energy psychology, and then they're thinking, how would this fit into their medical practice? So, looking at the reverse, because energy psychology methods are widely used in psychotherapy. And that makes sense for someone like me who's a psychiatrist. And I have that fortune that I can use some of these techniques daily. But they're used very specifically to address PTSD, social anxiety, OCD. They're used very specifically in the type of therapy model that that person would need for that condition. So if we're using exposure techniques for OCD with energy psychology, we're giving them some empowerment and capacity as they're doing that visualization of that initial first steps of exposure to be able to connect with that issue in a way that they're empowered when they're doing it. So they have the capacity to very quickly self regulate because they're working with their energy system at the same time to support moving through that and getting to the next stage. So, again, we're not going to be doing that kind of work as a coach. So, there are ways that energy psychology fits into both lanes, but it's used very differently.
Wow. Yeah, thank you for that clarification. Um, it's interesting that there are a lot of regulations when you have a clinical degree
Hmm.
versus being a coach. You can be certified as a coach or not, really.
Right.
Like you were mentioning, it's just such a wide variety of services that can be offered one on one. And it's really important to mindfully consider what your client needs. And do they need the help of a licensed practitioner?
Hmm.
And these are questions that I think all coaches should be asking themselves. Like, is this in my scope? Or
Right.
do they really need a little bit deeper work to resolve these long-standing issues? I think it sometimes gets a little bit cloudy. Like you said, the energy psychology can be used in both realms. And I think you're doing amazing work in parsing that out for clinicians in ASAP and in other platforms.
Well, thank you for that. And it also applies to working with one's spirit. A medical license, a therapy license is working with the psyche, the medical, the physical body. You're not working with the soul or spirit. That really doesn't belong within that realm, which may be very disappointing to some. And the example being soul retrieval, for example, that is a high level, multi step shamanic process that is not related to psychotherapy. The soul portion that has been distanced at the time of trauma does not need therapy, that it needs to be brought home when it's ready and in a way that it feels comfortable with as that soul becomes more whole, more complete to be able to go about the life of that soul. So when people think about, well, gosh, this therapy seems very much like soul retrieval. Well, it's likely aspect retrieval. It's likely parts work and maybe just has a different flavor or different description, but deep down, you're working with the psyche and really keeping that clear because a therapist's license, my license as a psychiatrist, does not cover working on a soul or spirit. There is no language within there that would say that that's covered. And your malpractice for therapy or medical care is not going to cover working on one's soul. There is malpractice coverage for coaches and spiritual and energetic healers that exists, and it's inexpensive, and people should have it. And it does cover that type of work, and expecting you to have the ethical training that goes along with certification programs to do that work ethically.
Thank you so much for addressing this really important issue.
You're welcome.
Before we wrap up, I really do want to know exactly what is your experience with using all of these different modalities and your journey with it, because I'd like to know if were you intuitive beforehand, or has the practice of all of these modalities increased your intuition, or how has that progressed for you personally?
I laugh because I grew up with a mom who knew things that we did the instant we did them, like the things that would get us in trouble, right? My friends called her KGB because it was like she had spies, but no one was calling her. She just knew. And I found out later that my mom, throughout her entire life, would know when someone was sick or hurt within the family, but she wouldn't know who. She'd run down to the office when she was a kid in elementary school. Someone's been hurt, and then find out later her cousin got bit by a dog, that kind of thing. But she wouldn't know who. It had no sense of direction. And later on, it developed for her where she would know who was in trouble. So I've learned to not talk about certain things that have happened in my life because she'll text me to see if I'm okay, just because I had talked about it and tapped in to that experience briefly. Because she doesn't need to be worrying about me for no reason. So that's the kind of mom I grew up with. Unbeknownst to me, my dad has the ability to sense the presence of spirits very easily. He has the ability to feel and sense energy very easily. And we didn't know this until my stepmom was dying from her terminal cancer. And I was teaching him a very basic healing touch technique, a pain siphon, and he was in between me and my stepmom and holding his hands, one higher, one lower, and I was the very bottom of the drain. And he looks at me and he said, "Am I supposed to feel something? Because I do." And I look at him as shocked because I figured he would feel nothing. I had no idea. And yet he's like, "I can feel this moving." I said, "This is great, Dad, because when I'm gone, then you'll be able to do this on your own and you'll know it's working." Most people can sense subtle energy, but sometimes it takes a little bit of support or help to have those first experiences where it's been reinforced, oftentimes by another person. Yep, what you're feeling is exactly what you should be feeling. Because for people to sense the flow of energy, it can be prickles or tingles or heat or cold. It can be any of a number of things. but that's how their body experiences it and sends that information back so they can register it. And then after she had passed, he calls me up a few weeks later and is kind of freaked out. And he said, Kerri, there's somebody walking through the walls in my house. They're coming back and forth. They're going into different rooms. Is this okay? And I said, and I don't know, this just came out of my mouth. I just said, well, probably Marita just sent the angels to check in on you. Now, I don't even know why I used the word angels, but that's what I said. Another week or so passes. He had gone into a bedroom that had been pretty much cleaned out and opened the drawer of a cabinet in there. And in the top drawer, there was a message from my stepmom saying, Ronnie, I'm going to make sure the angels come check on you to make sure you're okay. So she'd
Wow.
written this before she died, hung it or hid it in this drawer, and then they had come to check on him. And so he was really emotional because, my gosh, what do you do with that? And they did. It's so beautiful that when people have these experiences, A, they never forget them, and B, they realize there's something beyond you, beyond this life, beyond this experience. But until people have had those types of experiences, they often don't have something to ground it in. Because how could you have possibly made that up? And then here's this note, right?
Right.
There's no way possible that he could have come up with that on his own. And so that's what I come from. So I got a really beautiful double dose of people who had a sense of knowing and a sense of sensing. And so I've been able to sense spirits since I was little, and it's not always been positive. Sometimes it's been a little bit frightening, but I've learned how to navigate that over the decades, and being able to bring that to this work has been helpful for sure.
Wow. Dr. Kerri, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your expertise in this field. And I'm so excited to see what is coming up next with your profession, your work, and energy psychology and shamanism and all the things. Before we end, um, I'd like to ask my guests about what idea or thought they can leave the listener with.
I would like to tell anyone listening that your potential and capability is far more than you believe it is. Your conscious mind only works with 5% of the information. All the rest is waiting for you to capture it.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And where can we find your work, Dr. Kerri Husman?
So you can reach out to Eastwind Healing Center, the healing center that I have the great fortune of helping to run and organize and manage. And to reach out for coaching and wellness or to learn more about shamanism, go to mammothhills.com.
Great. And we'll have all that information in the description. So thank you for joining me today on Stacy's Infinity Podcast. Until next time, trust yourself and honor your inner wisdom. Bye for now.
The information in this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only and is not intended to be used as a substitute for legal, financial, or professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Listening to this podcast does not create a physician-patient relationship with Stacy Cisneros, Anastasia Cisneros Frausto, MD, or any guest on the podcast. Always seek the advice of your personal physician or qualified healthcare professional with any questions regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you heard on this podcast.